All right, good morning. This is Jay Waters. I'm with the Voices of Freedom Project and the American Wartime Experience. Today is 27 August. It's a Sunday. We're out here at the Tank Farm in Oaksville, Virginia. It's day 2 of our open house, and it's my pleasure this morning to do an interview with Bryan Griess. Bryan, if you could, for the record, maybe just introduce yourself with your full name and where you grew up as a kid.
So, Bryan Griess, I grew up in northern Minnesota, a small little town called Park Rapids, and came into the military shortly after 9/11. Actually, it took me a few years, but witnessed 9/11 while I was attending college, and after that, I really made the desire and the push to actually join the military and went into the Army and stuff like that.
Oh, excellent. And we'll get to 9/11 here in a second, but so you were in the Army. What conflicts did you participate in?
So all of my deployments were for OEF, Afghanistan. Had multiple deployments there. I had 3 of them. Ventured all over the country with all of them. From Kandahar to Ghazni to Jalalabad. Each one took me to a different location.
Sounds like you were busy.
Yeah.
And we'll talk some more about that in a second. So, but let me just ask again about background. So, from your family, thinking about your dad or your grandfather, uncles, aunts, for that matter. Did you have other family members that had served in the military before you?
I did. My grandfather was actually in the Army Air Corps and served during World War II in the Pacific Theater. And was a mechanic on the planes and everything for down there. And then my uncle, my dad's oldest brother, served during Vietnam and then actually retired, I think, around 91. And he was an Army medic.
Okay. Good. Well, and you mentioned 9/11, but maybe a little bit more specifically. Can you tell us, I think you said you were in college, but where you were? Tell us about that day for you. What was that like?
So it was actually quite interesting. I had a morning class, and before I even got up and going, and I was up at Bemidji State University in northern Minnesota, and my best friend at the time just all of a sudden burst in through the door. He's like, "Hey, you got to turn on the news. Something's happened." So, and all of a sudden, as we turned on the TV, because I was one of the few that had it, because he'd already had a morning class, and they shut everything down. And so we sat there and we watched 9/11 unfold after the first tower was hit, and we sat there and watched it all day. And yeah, so we sat in my dorm room and just watched everything happen, and it was after that everything else transpired.
When did you realize it was not just an accident and an actual terrorist attack?
It took a day or two. It's just like really pretty much after the second plane hit. It's like, okay, that's too much of a coincidence for it to really be, just a coincidence. It's like, okay, with the FAA and everything, they're going to keep everything locked down off after the first plane. And then really when the Pentagon was hit as well, that just showed that there was something else. When you have different locations and stuff like that, that's, really when it hit hard, it's like, okay, this is not just an accident.
Well, did you have classes the next day?
No, so it was for a couple of days that they shut down all classes. Yeah. It wasn't just, okay, you're immediately going back after this one event. And
that was up in Minnesota.
Yep.
Okay. Well, so that's a great story there. Why did you end up joining the military? What made you want to join?
So, I always had a desire. I thought about joining right after high school, but it just never transpired. I wanted to do sports and stuff like that, so I went up and ran track for a couple of years up at the university that I was attending.
It's a big hockey school up there too, right?
It is. It's a very big hockey school, but I wasn't quite the size for hockey up there, to make it at the college level.
Yeah,
I was still pretty small, but I could run like the wind, so I went and ran track.
But so you ended up joining after college, or what was the?
So yeah, I was kind of all over the place with my degrees. I never really found one that really stuck with me and that really thought of what I wanted to pursue for the rest of my life. So I'd went back to my hometown for a little bit, and then was working at a friend's greenhouse up there, and well, lo and behold, his oldest brother was the recruiter in the area. So, and I mean, we all grew up together, so every day he'd be like, "Bryan, when are you joining the Army?" And so after that, it's just like, all right, one day after I'm driving back and forth, because I was still going to school, just driving back and forth, I'm like, I'm going to stop by his office just to see if I can get him to stop. And then, next thing I knew, I was signing on the dotted line and going off to basic training down at Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay. And what did you get? from the recruiter? You get a good deal?
I thought I got a pretty good deal, and it, come to find out, they're like, initially I wanted to be an MP, and they're like, well, your scores on the ASVAB are just too high to be an MP, so they put me into counterintelligence, and that's what I ended up pursuing for almost 16 years.
Yeah, so for anybody listening here, MP is military police, so Bryan was too smart to be a cop. So
that's right.
Don't say that to the guys outside. They're all ex-police officers.
All right.
Okay, yeah, so tell us a little bit more then about basic training and then any advanced training that you got after that. What was that like for you?
So, basic was definitely an eye-awakening experience. And, I really never would have projected, how they break you down and then build you back up. It was definitely an eye changer for me down at Fort Leonard Wood. And I mean, dead of summer at that too. I went from June through August. So Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, it was hot. It was humid. Drank a lot of water. Then after that, Fort Huachuca for my advanced schooling and stuff like that. And then
how'd you like Arizona coming from Minnesota?
It was different. But fortunately, I was there the fall through the winter and stuff like that. So the heat wasn't as bad. But it was dry, which was nice. It wasn't like you were drinking water every time you stepped outside to take a breath.
Well, and what year was this that you actually went in? Do you remember?
So I went in June of 2005, and then I got out in April of 2021.
Okay, so June of 2005, Iraq's going on.
Yep.
Afghanistan is going on.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you joined, you obviously knew all this. Were you hoping to get deployed? What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I was hoping to get deployed, but instead they first sent me off to Korea, who also like another deployment.
Yeah.
So my first experience overseas, well, as enlisted, was over in Korea, and I was part of a small office over there.
Well, so now I want to talk specifically about Afghanistan. You've got multiple tours, 3 tours, so you can kind of answer these as you see fit, but maybe just tell us, I always find this interesting, how did you physically get to Afghanistan on one of those deployments? What was that process like for you?
So I just returned back to stateside after Korea and stuff like that, and then we were actually prepping to go to Iraq. That's where our unit was supposed to go, and then all of a sudden they changed.
And what unit was that?
That was with 5th Brigade 2ID,
Okay.
2nd Infantry Division. We were supposed to go to Iraq, and a bunch of us had been going through language training for that, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, last minute change, we're going to Afghanistan.
Different language.
Yep. And so it was kind of a quick shock, and stuff like that. So then all of a sudden we, went right out of Fort Lewis, Washington, or now it's Joint Base Lewis McChord. And then, we got on the planes from there and went from, I can't remember, we went through Manis, I think is where we went, and then Manis into Afghanistan.
Kurdistan.
Yeah. So.
All aircraft.
Yep, all aircraft.
And you go into Bagram?
No, we actually flew from there all the way down to Kandahar.
Okay.
Yep.
So, okay. Well, what was it like in Kandahar?
I just remember stepping off the plane and getting that blast of heat right in your face, and you're in your kit and everything, and it was sweltering.
And what year do you think that was?
That was 2009. We got over there in July of 2009, and then we returned July of 2010.
Yeah. So 3 tours. Was each tour a year long?
No. So first one was a year. The second one was about 6 months, and that was up in Ghazni province. And then the third one was 9 months.
Okay. Well, still a lot of time. I was only there for 1 year, but again, 3 tours. But maybe tell us whether Kandahar or Ghazni, one of the other ones. What was like a typical day for you?
So a lot of it was just, going out and talking to different contractors and stuff like that, just making sure that everybody was keeping their eyes open, because you never knew when something was going to happen. So that was the biggest thing, was just talking to everybody to make sure that, everybody was paying attention and being vigilant, because that our main priority was to protect every soldier over there.
And when you went out and talked to these contractors and stuff, were you in uniform or?
Sometimes I was in uniform, sometimes I was in civilian clothes.
Okay. And did you speak any of the local languages or anything?
No, I usually had an interpreter with me, so that wasn't my forte, as you could put it. I could pick up words here and there, but even with the language school, it's just like there's so much difference between Arabic to Pashtun and all the different languages that are over there. You just couldn't keep up with it.
Well, did you feel safe or unsafe, or what was your threat assessment of being outside the base?
So I really never went outside. We focused on the inside.
Okay.
So.
But you can still learn quite a bit
Yep.
from
Oh yeah.
those guys and gals.
Yep.
Yeah. And what was the threat assessment even on the base? Did you have small arms attacks or rocket attacks?
There were rocket attacks. Most of them were like the second 2 deployments were pretty quiet. I mean, you really didn't have to have that much of a threat. I mean, you're just all sitting there talking with everybody, and pretty safe environment on the second 2.
Yeah, and so your third tour there, what year was that?
That was in 2015 to 16.
Oh, towards the end.
Yeah.
So not to open a political can of worms, but what were your thoughts on having been there 3 times and closer to the end than the beginning? What were your thoughts about how it all ended?
So with that, kind of torn, because it's like so many of these, especially the interpreters and some of these families, I mean, they gave and risked so much just to, make sure that we understood everything that was going on. I mean, their interpretation skills and teaching us also about the local culture was pretty vital. So I think, we did what we had to do, but at the same time, it could have been done a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. Well, so you mentioned a couple rocket attacks, but any other harrowing moments or strange encounters with the enemy or anything?
No, nothing really. It's just, it was kind of always a running joke, about on Kandahar Airfield, the boardwalk, as they called it. And I mean, it was kind of one of the main targets. So there was a ball hockey league, and I remember that, and I played with that. Each country had their own little respective teams. And
what kind of sport was it?
Ball hockey. So it was like hockey, but, it's just with a ball. So.
The young man from Minnesota.
Yep.
In the desert. Did you have any interaction even on the base there with the locals, the Afghans?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, you had your interpreter. Any relationships that you built with those guys and gals?
Not really. Kept it pretty professional at that and stuff like that. Dealt with a lot of liaison, dealing with the other nations and stuff like that were there. I mean, because Kandahar was a massive base, so you had every NATO country that was there. So.
Yeah. Any interesting interaction with any of the foreign countries, foreign militaries?
Just always remember talking to the Canadians and stuff like that. I mean, the thing is that we'd always talk about hockey, so that was the one commonality.
Canadians and hockey, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, so how did you stay? If you were married or you had your family back home, how did you stay in touch with family while you were deployed?
So in first 2 deployments, really didn't have kept in touch with my family back home. I wasn't married at the time, so I mean that was pretty easy and stuff like that. So. It's Skype, email, different little communication platforms when the Wi-Fi was up. I mean, that was always hit or miss.
Yeah, and then sounds like you were pretty busy, but you had some downtime. There was the hockey league, but what other kind of things did you or the other soldiers do for entertainment?
Lot of movies. Kept in touch that way. Or otherwise, for those that brought their Xboxes and stuff like that, every once in a while I remember a few Halo tournaments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Any USO shows or any visitors?
Oh yeah, there was a few of them. I remember. Now I can't think of his name, but guy that played Tony Soprano off The Sopranos.
Okay. Yeah.
I cannot remember his name, but him. And there's a whole bunch of them that came over as part of a USO tour.
That's nice.
So
you got to see that.
Yeah.
Good. And I always like to ask you, how was the food? How was the chow?
So on Kandahar, it was actually usually pretty good. You could mix between multiple different dining facilities within all the different countries. So, Sundays I always remember going over to the British DFAC because they had the pot roast and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. And were there like a gym on the base too?
Yeah, there's multiple gyms. I mean, so I always were able to keep in shape and keep going.
Okay. Any other like specific incidents, either something really scary or exciting, or even like a funny anecdote, anything that stands out from any of your tours there?
Nothing really scary that I can really, pinpoint down, but just always the rocket attacks. I mean, you just never knew when they were going to come.
Right.
So.
Well, so if you had a rocket attack, did you have a fighting position that you were supposed to go man, or a bunker? Kind of talk us through what
So yeah, when rockets would hit, you just run over to the nearest bunker wherever you were at on base and stuff like that. They had them scattered throughout. So.
And did you have a weapon with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of weapon were you?
M4.
Were you a good shot?
Decent. As I matured through the military, I became a much better shot. Started off a little rough and stuff like that, but as I progressed through the years, became better at it, more proficient.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming you got promoted a few times throughout your career.
Yep.
Maybe can you tell us about like a meaningful promotion, even deployed or not, or your last promotion for that matter? What was that like?
So I think the most meaningful one for me was probably being pinned to staff sergeant, and that was on my last deployment, and just had a really good group of people that just always mentored me and stuff like that, but also had a good group of soldiers that I could ask for assistance and stuff like that for.
Where did that take place?
That was actually in Afghanistan. That was at small little base called TB Gambari.
What would the TB stand?
I think it was training base because it was part of the TAC East headquarters and stuff like that is where I was assigned to.
Okay.
So you coached and mentored all the Afghan soldiers that were there.
Okay,
so
like the training.
Yep.
Did you ever have any incidents, or were you aware of any incidents where the Afghans, in this case that we were training, turned on the U.S. soldiers? I guess green on blue, called it blue on green.
So yeah, that was part of my main job was to look at all the reporting coming through to make sure that the commanders were aware of okay, here are the current threats in your insider threats that are in your area, and that was one of my main focuses throughout all three of my deployments was to make sure that they had the most vital information so they can make the correct decisions.
Yeah, I guess I'd heard from other guys. It was always like a leap of faith the first time you turn your back on an armed Afghan that's your partner.
Yep.
You just got to take, I guess, trust.
Yep.
And guys like you looking out for us. So.
Yep.
Okay. Did you receive any awards or medals for your deployment time?
I mean, you always had your end of tour awards and stuff like that. So I always kind of joked about those. I mean, most of them were ARCOMs, if I remember right, and then I had the Bronze Star at the end of my third deployment.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, the Bronze Star is a pretty significant award. So
yep.
Congratulations. You obviously were working hard and did all the right things.
Yep.
And then again, from any one of the deployments, what was coming home like? You've been there for 12 months or 9 months, whatever, and then you're coming back to the work.
It was always kind of funny, wondering, okay, were my parents actually going to show up and stuff like that the first two, and they were usually there about the day after I got back. So, I always had that thought, okay, they're going to be there. It might not be that very day, but, the very next day as I wake up back stateside, they were there. Yeah. So it was always nice just knowing that they were going to, be there shortly after. Because they would drive out from Minnesota to wherever I was located at within the United States. So It took them a while.
Good. Anybody from your military time that you still keep in touch with?
Oh yeah, I still keep in touch with even some of my first NCOs and stuff like that I met throughout my time in the service, and even now it's just I've run into people, whether it's through Facebook and stuff like that, all of a sudden shooting a message and catching up on times. It's always fun to see where everybody else has ended up at.
Well then, so you ended up medically separating, but what have you done since? You told me a little bit off camera, but what have you been doing since?
So after that, after getting out, I actually was going back to school full time to become a high school history teacher, and then instructor position came up out here at Quantico, Virginia, and that's what I've been doing for about the last 9 months now. As I've been an instructor out here at a DoD Intel school.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, how do you think your wartime experience specifically, 16 years of military time, but your wartime experience specifically has affected your life going forward?
Oh, it absolutely has. It gives you a whole different perspective. You really learn to appreciate the things that we have, and you go into these, whether it's Afghanistan or any other country, I mean, you look at the struggles that they put up with and stuff like that, and it does give you a different perspective in how, what are some of the things that we could change even here in the United States.
Okay. Well, that's good. And looking ahead, I met part of your family, kids or grandkids, great-grandchildren down the road. If there's one thing that you would want future generations to know about you and your military service, what would that be? What would you like them to know?
Just always, I would want them to know, hey, take pride in your country. Always be willing to fight for what you believe is right.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. And then the last question is always the proverbial question. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover or revisit? Anything that we missed that you wanted to share?
No, I just really encourage other veterans, get out there, tell your story. And that's one thing that, we can always learn from is, storytelling has always been one of the best ways of learning is, tell your story.
Yeah.
Because everybody has a different story. We all went in under different reasons, and we all served with different, backgrounds and beliefs.
Well, and I agree. And that's what we're doing today. So, well, Bryan, I'm going to turn the camera off here in a second, but just on the record still, say thank you for coming out.
Oh, thank you.